Please stand by. We'll get started in just a moment.
Okay, I want to call the meeting to order at 2:07 p.m. Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Yes. Yes. Board Member Hurlock.
Here.
Board Member Paulson.
Here via Zoom.
Board Member
Here.
Paulson.
Here.
Thank you. And Chair Stubblefield.
Present.
Thank you. I will now swear in our new Air Pollution Control District Hearing Board member, Kathleen Paulson. Please raise your right arm and repeat after me. I, Kathleen Paulson, do solemnly affirm
I, Kathleen Paulson, do solemnly affirm
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the State of California
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the State of California
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of California,
and the Constitution of the State of California,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which I am about to enter.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Now, Chair Stubblefield, I will swear in the witnesses, which are here in person and on Zoom today. So if all the witnesses on Zoom and the staff and witnesses in person can raise their right arm. You do solemnly affirm that the testimony that you are about to give in the matters now pending before this board will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
Yes.
You may not be seated. You are seated. Thank you.
Will the representatives of the petitioners please state your names, your position/job titles for the record, and present your petition?
Good afternoon, board members. My name is Cleet Saunier. I'm the Public Works Director for the City of Santa Paula.
My name is Chris Martin. I'm a consulting engineer working with the City of Santa Paula as a liaison and management of the water reclamation facility.
Good afternoon. I'm Mike Nunley with MKN and Associates, and I'm also a consulting engineer working with the city at the water recycling facility.
And good afternoon. My name is Paul Savage. I'm the Vice President of Operations for Veolia. We're the contract operator working for the city, operating the plant in Santa Paula.
And my name is Norman Bijot. I am the Technical Director for Veolia Operations and currently the CPO at the Santa Paula Water Reclamation Facility.
Is that everybody?
I believe that is it for the petitioners. So, yes.
So is there somebody for the petitioner here going to do a presentation? Physically here?
Yes, yes. Several of us will be presenting different parts of the presentation. I'd like to go ahead and start, and then I'll, would it be easiest for me just to tell the clerk when to move to the next slide?
Yes, I believe so. I'm trying to see if there's a way I can give you control, but I do not see it. So this time it would just be best to say next slide when you're ready to advance.
Okay, thank you. I'm Mike Nunley with MKN and Associates. We really appreciate the opportunity to speak to the district today, to district board today, and request a variance to address the sulfide issues at this Santa Paula water recycling facility. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about some history of the sulfide issue that we've had, talk about some of the actions the city's already taken, and then provide recommendations and conclusions for how we will address the sulfide exceedances at the WRF. Next slide, please. I'd like to give a brief history of the WRF operation because I think it's important for understanding how we've had issues with the with odor control at the facility for the last year or so. So the city of Santa Paula, as many of you know, is a disadvantaged community. That's been determined by the Department of Water Resources and also the State Water Resources Control Board, among other funding agencies who offer grants and low interest loan funding for municipalities. In 2010, the city WRF was completed by a design, build, operate, finance entity to meet a cease and desist order from Regional Water Quality Control Board against further discharges from the old Santa Paula plant to the Santa Clara River. So at that time, the city had to work with the design, build, operate, finance entity who could basically finance and construct and operate the facility for them because the city could not qualify for public financing. The credit rating was not sufficient to qualify for bonds or loans, and so their funding options were very limited. At that time, the citizens of Santa Paula, as a result of that contract, wound up paying some of the highest rates in Ventura County, even though they were even then a disadvantaged community. By 2015, the city had improved their credit rating, and that allowed them to qualify for bond financing, and that allowed them to buy their WRF back from that private entity that had owned the plant to that point. But as a result of that, the city had to pay a buyout penalty. One of the members of the DBOF entity continued as the contract operator. But one of the challenges was the way that contract was written, there was a lack of transparency on capital improvements and plant condition at that time, just because the agreement that the city had with the operation entity didn't really provide all the information the city needed to understand what was happening at the plant in terms of the performance of different treatment systems, including the odor control system. In 2017, the city in 2016, the city solicited a request for proposal for a contract operator. That was one of the conditions of their bond financing, is they did have to go out to an RFP process for a contract operator, and American Water Operations and Management was awarded that contract. They identified right away some significant design issues, rehabilitation needs, in conjunctions with our staff who were working with the city as a consultant. And really, since then, the city capital improvement program has been focused on repair and replacement of many of the WRF systems. Next slide, please. So one of the challenges with the WRF is it's not the kind of facility that can be turned off if it's not meeting its permit requirements for air quality. The plant really has to run continuously 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, because it is a wastewater treatment facility, and it's necessary to protect water quality. And also for basic sanitation for city residents. So some of the issues the city's faced over the years, the instrumentation and control system failures resulted in 2 plant spills in 2015 and 2018. 2 of the 3 membrane feed pumps, which are a critical system for pushing water through the plant, those have failed. 3 of the aerobic digester blowers have experienced multiple failures and complete rebuilds twice over the past 3 years. The membranes, which are a very important part of this membrane bioreactor facility, require replacement. That's approximately a $2 million capital project. And all of the aeration basins require cleaning and retrofit over the next 3 years. So the city has some pretty significant issues that they're addressing as part of their capital improvement program. And in specific with the odor control, which again is one of these systems that requires a lot of attention. The ERISA system that's used currently in that plant is uncommon among other municipal wastewater treatment facilities. There just aren't many of these around. There's no local service provider for it. And our assessment from looking at it is it does not appear to be sized properly for the current sulfide levels that are coming into the plant. And just servicing the odor control system has cost a little over $200,000 over the last year. So at this point, I'll turn it over to Paul Savage.
Yes, we'll go to the next slide, please. Hello, can you hear me? Thank you.
We can hear you.
Okay, this
We can't hear you. I'm going to ask you to pause for a minute.
is a to Santa Paula. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you're breaking up quite a bit. It sounds like maybe a bad internet connection.
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay, sorry about that. So this is a diagram of the odor control systems at Santa Paula Wastewater Recycling Facility. This diagram was included with the request for variance. On the lower left-hand side, you can see where the sewer water enters into the facility. Wastewater gives off the gases there. The gas of concern in this discussion today is hydrogen sulfide, or referred to it sometimes as H2S. It smells like rotten eggs. The control system, or the odor control system on that side of the plant uses 3 ERISA ionization odor control units that treat the odors, and that treated air is exhausted through what we refer to there at the top as the ERISA silo. On the right side of the diagram, that's the second odor control treatment system that's at the plant. Uses a granulated activated carbon scrubber made by Hawk, so it's commonly referred to as the Hawk system. But it also has another Ariza unit that is used on that side of the plant, and that treats the odors coming from the Headworks building. Okay, if we can go on to the next slide. So the main problem with odor control that we're facing is the Ariza unit and that odor control system that we were talking to on the left-hand side of that last diagram. And it's occasionally overloaded, such that the air exiting the Ariza silo exceeds the 1.2 ppm over 15-minute average limit. The permit level limit of 1.2 ppm over 15-minute average is exceeded about 15% of all the readings. It's not 15% of every day though. For example, in April, we saw exceedances on 23 of the 30 days, at least once during those 23 days. So kind of an interesting problem, but just try to give the magnitude of what we're facing. Okay, and we can move on to the next slide if everyone's done on there. On here, so we also know that there's been no offsite odors or complaints, even though the H2S emissions are occasionally exceeding that 1.2 ppm limit. A review of the data shows that H2S normally does not exceed 6 ppm. The OSHA limit for 8 hours of exposure to H2S is 10 ppm. So we're below that limit as well. Also, there's been no odor complaints to the city or the district in over 7 years, with the nearest resident living only about 400 yards from the site. Finally, H2S is not a hazardous pollutant per EPA. Next slide. So, yeah, looking back to when the facility passed the source test in August of 2018, we failed the test in the source test in October of 2019, and we tried to explore in depth, why did we fail that test in 2019? The only operational change or equipment that we had changed out was the H2S sensors. We had them changed out and calibrated, but that shouldn't or it doesn't impact the source test data, because during the source test, grab samples are taken and analyzed by independent labs, so they don't use our H2S readings at the plant. So, after failing that test in October of 19, we looked at all the operational procedures and changes that were made between 2017 and 2018, and they were done by the previous operator, American Water. All those procedures and processes were turned over to Veolia and maintained at the site. So we were continuing to maintain the plant per those procedures, and maintaining the equipment by the procedures as well. So what basically when those Ariza and Hawk systems failed the odor control test in 2017, there were a lot of changes that were made, both the process and maintenance practices, such that when the plant passed in 2018, a lot of credit was given to those changes that were made. But so looking at our processes and practices for maintenance, we should have passed the test in October 2019. Okay, moving on to the next slide. So continued to dig a little deeper and trying to find out why the plant didn't pass in 2019, October of 19. So we pulled out the records for all the source tests going back to 2012, and we noticed a very interesting trend, especially over the past 5 years when we plotted all the source test data. And what I mean, all the source test data. So each time we test the plant, there's an average of 3 or more runs of samples that are drawn. So an influent and effluent sample taken at the same time is considered a run. And so many of these tests had at least 3 and sometimes as many as 6 runs for a test. So it gave us a pretty good data set to take a look at. So what we saw here, so even when the average of all the runs were below 1.2 ppm limit, or 1.2 ppm on the effluent, the overall plant passed the source test, there were runs within those source tests that the influent H2S was in excess of about 10 ppm, resulting in the effluent or the exhaust from the ARESA units exceeding 1.2 ppm. So we had a good set of data to look at. And another example, so like in 2015, take a look there, the overall test passed, but during the last run, influent H2S had risen to about 22.8 ppm, and the exhaust from the ARESA exceeded the 1.2 ppm value. So that's just an example of where overall the test passed, but it gave us this data showing that the ARESA was overloaded at that point. In 2017, 4 runs were done during the test, and the average influent H2S was 11.7 ppm. The overall emissions average was just above the 1.2 ppm limit at 1.99. Okay. So, and in 18 and 20, kind of interestingly, so in between the 2 failures, 17 and 19, the source test passed, but the influent was below 10 ppm. So what am I getting at? We'll go to the next slide, and I think be able to see this a little bit better. So this is a graph of all these test runs between 2015 and 2020 that we were really focused on, and with influent H2S on the x-axis and effluent from the ARESA silo on the y-axis. What comes to light here is that over the last 5 years, when the influent H2S exceeds about 10 ppm, the ARESA system is unable to maintain emissions below the 1.2 ppm desired. Okay. And I think I'm turning this back over to Chris. Did you want to discuss this?
Yeah, I'll take this.
Okay.
Based upon the things that we've seen, and I want to emphasize a certain point, is that we, over the last 10 years, we have seen increases in the H2S concentration in the sewage entering the treatment plant. We believe this is probably because of water conservation efforts that have reduced the amount of water, but increased the solids concentration of the water that's coming in. And this has resulted in higher H2S concentrations. So where we saw concentrations averaging down in well, between 2 to 10 in the early stages of the treatment plant, that has increased, and now we're seeing averages substantially higher, approaching 10, which means that there a significant amount of time we are in fact higher than the 10 ppm that Paul was mentioning. Things that we've done over the last couple of years to address these issues, as we saw exceedances begin to happen, the operator and the CD have performed a number of actions. First thing we did was we made sure that the software was providing proper information. At one time we were not making the correct 15-minute average calculation. We were just reporting instantaneous values, and that needed to be corrected to meet a permit requirement. That was done earlier this year. We sampled the wastewater gases entering the plant, and that determined that again, that the H2S concentrations entering the plant have gone up. So they're now averaging between 8 to 13 ppm and peaking at 50, whereas the original design concentration for the ARESA system was a maximum of 15 ppm. At the previous time, back in 2017, we attempted.
Excuse me. Sorry, Chair Stubberfield, may I interrupt for a moment? We no longer have a quorum as Board Member Herlock has disconnected. I recommend we take a brief recess while we try to reestablish a quorum. All right.
No problem.
apologize. I'm not sure what happened. I will try to get him on the phone. Just a moment.
This is an interesting method of making a presentation. It feels strange not to be standing.
All right, we can go back on the record whenever you're ready, Chair Stubblefield.
Sorry about that.
Okay. We can resume.
Okay, we'd like to go back up those two slides to the graph. You had the board member had a question?
Is this the slide you'd like?
Yeah, I just want to see, look at it. Just, why is that, why do you suppose it dropped so much on the 0.88 on the output, 0.88 and 1.79? Any speculation? System especially worked well, or?
Yeah, no, I do have a pretty good explanation, I think, on those two different tests. The first one there, the 17.5, was the last run of 3, and the previous runs were very low H2S coming into the system, and it just spiked up to 17.5. So either there's a suspect reading with the 17.5, or the exhaust just hadn't reached its peak yet.
Okay.
So it was still coming up.
All right.
And I could say that it's known, a known behavior of sewers that the effluent is surgy.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
you can get bubbles of stuff coming through.
Okay. And then one other question too on the the spike in April this year, is that because everybody's home, you think?
Could be.
Influence?
Although I don't know that I would say that it was necessarily a spike in April this year.
Oh, okay. I thought I heard somebody say.
That was just an example of
Oh.
what we see.
Okay.
What is the abscissa here?
Those that is the influent concentrate, H2S concentration taken during the test. And it is not to scale.
And the vertical axis is the output?
That's correct. These, I should also state that these values, that these bars are not chronological.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to.
They are
figure
arranged
that out.
according to influent concentration, with the
Okay.
intent of demonstrating that we're good below 10 ppm, but we're not good above 10 ppm.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Let's go down to, what is it? Where are we? Slide 10, I think, is where we quit. Okay. I was mentioning that the chemical pretreatment was tried back in 2017 and found to be infeasible. We tried injecting sodium hypochlorite upstream of the treatment plant, but it was not effective. Well, it was somewhat effective, but it was caused significant other issues that made it not work. And finally, we showed we were not getting alarms ahead of time before the exceedance, so we modified the alarm system to provide an alarm at 1.0 ppm instead of the 1.2 limit, and modified SOPs so that staff has specific tasks to perform when those alarms came through. Okay, next slide, please. Other changes that were implemented to reduce it, and these are some of those things that began back under American Water in 2017, but have been carried through and amplified if possible. Providing, and this the first item there was done recently. We had the ERISA factory service representative in addition to review the system and make repairs. In addition, the on-site staff, the Veolia staff, has performed a substantial amount of maintenance over the last 18 months, spending over $200,000 on repair parts and so forth to keep the systems operational. Since the H2S is developed by bacterial action in the treatment plant, one method of reducing the production rate is to keep the inventory of solids low, and that has been done, and it was somewhat effective. The plant is equipped with equalization basins to try to even out the flow, since sewer flows are inconstant and have substantial variation throughout the day. Equalization basins were provided to even those flows out, but they provided a location where a bacteria could develop H2S. So in order to keep that from happening, those equalization basins have been taken out of service, except for those for very significant flow excursions where the treatment plant cannot handle the capacity. And finally, the plant implemented additional cleaning procedures to keep solids inventory as low as possible in the headworks and the dewatering areas. Those continue to be practiced, and they have provided some benefit, but that benefit has not been sufficient. Next slide, please. So, after a lot of effort, spending a fair amount of money, the city has determined that the ERA system is just no longer capable of performing the work. So they directed MKN to begin design of a new system for construction and completion in the next summer. Next slide, please. So the conclusions that we've come to in what the work that we have done. First of all, we have seen increases in the H2S concentrations entering the system, not really the H2S concentrations produced by the treatment plant, which have remained under control, but the H2S concentrations entering the treatment plant have come up substantially to the point where they are beyond the capability of the odor control system to handle them. Second conclusion is that the operational changes made were somewhat effective. They helped, they reduced H2S production, but they are not sufficient. Third conclusion is that the ERISA system, it's old, it's requiring constant repair. As I mentioned earlier, we've spent over $200,000 in direct costs, plus some 400 plus hours of additional, unexpected labor in the last 18 months, and it is unable to do the job, so the system must be replaced. And therefore, we have the city directed MKN to begin design of an alternative system for implementation. The city had anticipated that this was going to be required in the future, and they had established in their capital improvement program budget replacement of the ERISA system in the fiscal year 21-22, and with design to be in 2021. When these issues began to happen, when we failed the source test in October, and things continued to not look so good throughout the beginning of this year, the city determined to accelerate that budget. They have now directed us again, MKN, to begin design immediately. We anticipate having design completed by the 1st of September. We will then be seeking authority to construct and going out to bid for replacement of the entire odor control system with a new biological filter odor control system. That is expected to be complete and operational by mid-2021 at an additional cost to the city of $1.3 million. Next slide. Just to give you an idea of what this is going to consist of, the photograph on the right side there shows the existing, to the very far right of that picture is the Hawk GAC scrubber system. The two brown boxes, metallic boxes, are two ERISA units, and the block box that they are up against is the ERISA silo, where the odors are, where time is given for the ERISA system to work. You can see from the drawing on the right side, pardon me, on the left side.
Can you hear me? Excuse me. Do you have a pointer?
I do not have the ability to point at anything, no.
I can try to point from my end. So are you talking about E right here? Is that where you're currently at?
That is one of the ERISA systems. And if you go to your left, that's the second ERISA system that are comprised this particular unit. That concrete block wall just slightly go up. That is the silo where the reaction actually occurs, the ERISA reaction occurs. On the drawing to the left, the arrow, the blue arrow that I've sketched in there shows you the view of that photograph. That's where you're standing and looking. The new system, or all of those units, I guess I should say, will be removed ultimately. The new system is that darker system just to in the sketch. You can see the circle there. That is the new bio-air filtration system. Okay, and it will be installed just to the outside of the existing treatment plant adjacent to the wall. Note in the photograph the height of that 10-foot wall around the treatment plant. Okay, next photo or next slide, please. That wall, I wish I could point. would make it a lot easier. That the elevation to the right side shows the height of the BioAir system, which is about 25 feet, and it is surrounded by that 10-foot wall. The plan detailed to the left shows the layout of where the system will go. So the objective will be to complete construction of this BioAir system, switch over to its operation to make sure it's working, and then take the other two units out and remove them. Next slide. Oh, wait, no, go next slide. Sorry. I did want to mention the design capacity of the new system will be 20,000 CFM, which is sufficient to take care of both the ERISA and the HAWK systems, assuming a 50 ppm inflow H2S, and with a design effluent of less than 1.2 ppm H2S, which is the permit level. Now, next slide, please. Just to give you an idea of how this system, how effective the system is, this is a very partial reference list. The manufacturers supplied a substantially longer list, but I picked out a few items that match either in capacity or in quality. And you can see that they easily match the 20,000 cubic feet per minute with a maximum of 25,000 here, and they have larger ones. Influent H2S design concentration ranges up to 225 ppm compared to our anticipated 50. And their discharge concentrations can be even lower than the permit level. So we are very confident that this system is capable of meeting the permit requirements and bringing the treatment plant back into compliance. Okay, next slide. With that, our presentation is complete, and we'd be happy to field any questions you might have.
I do have a question. Have you explored possible other reasons, like maybe somebody out in the community is doing something to increase the H2S? Is that possible, or is it just the concentrated influent?
It's possible, but the concentrations haven't increased sufficiently to explain
Okay.
everything.
Okay.
There is, the city does have a pretreatment, industrial pretreatment permit program, so that anyone in industry who is discharging to the sewer is required to pre-treat, monitor, and report anything. So it's possible that there's an illegal operation going on, but it's unlikely.
Okay.
And if I may, also, we did do testing in several lift stations within the city. We also did many manholes. We put odor log systems in there and tested them, and we couldn't find any significant area, lateral or main, that was giving more than the other.
Thanks.
At this point, if there are no questions, we'll turn the control back over to the clerk or the chairman, whoever takes over now.
I might have a couple of questions. This is Board Member Hurlock. I'm looking at the order and the documents that we received. A couple of questions on does the petitioner have the order?
The notice of violation?
No, the document that is headed, that says before the hearing board.
Not sure where.
Is
Yeah,
this the
okay.
document you're referring to?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so this is the draft order prepared by the district.
On page 3 of that, if the text down at in the bottom paragraph, the source test was required to be conducted, but was not conducted. That last paragraph, what, can I get an explanation of that?
Yeah, so it's Paul Savage. That was late. There was a misunderstanding. We thought it was an annual test, and so we were late scheduling it. Didn't realize it was on a 12-month calendar basis.
Or you thought it was a rolling 12 months?
Right. It's a rolling 12-month is what it's supposed to be, but we thought it was an annual, and we missed that requirement.
Okay, maybe I could have figured this out in real time from your diagrams, but is the H2S that is released, is that released at ground level?
In the existing system, the H2S is released and elevated it through a stack. If we could, well,
How high is that stack?
About 20 feet, I think. Is that about right? Norm, I think you probably know the best there.
I believe it's about 14 feet high because the
14,
wall is
okay.
10 feet and then there's about another 4 to 5 feet on the actual stack.
Okay. You alluded, you described a little bit about the fiscal years and the funding. I don't know whether it's significant or not for this discussion, but on page 5 in the paragraph that ends right before findings of fact, in the middle it talks about was originally planned for one fiscal year and was advanced to another fiscal year, but was somehow left in the original fiscal year. I found that kind of confusing. That the section that begins with the city directed its consulting engineer to accelerate.
This is Clayton Saunier with the city Public Works Director. What specifically are you asking about that?
The paragraph that begins with, I mean, starting with the city directed consulting engineer and so forth. I find it kind of, I can't follow. I don't understand what exactly you're saying.
Okay, well, we had this scheduled in our 5-year projected window in our capital improvement plan program for the wastewater treatment plant. And we had originally allocated future funding for that in fiscal year 2021 for design, and then 21-22 for construction. And then once this became an issue and it started raising up its ugly head in terms of how much H2S was coming, through work with my consultants here, we converted that and accelerated that to 1 year earlier, so we could address this problem much sooner and have funding allocated for it accordingly.
As I said, it probably doesn't bear on our decision, which I still find it confusing. Maybe it's just.
Well, I think based on my understanding of the CIP, the original construction schedule was for 21-22, and that might be a typo. That it shouldn't be referencing remain in 2021. It was actually planned in 21-22, and we advanced everything up to 2021.
Okay, there's no 22 in what I'm looking at.
That's correct. I noticed that now, sir.
Um, there, what, one of the findings that we need to find is finding number 2, which is on page 6. It's always, I always find it difficult anyway to find, this basically says on item number 2 that nothing you did or didn't do resulted in us being here today. That you didn't have a reasonable control over this, over where we all are, where you are. Can you try and make me believe that?
Well, I believe the findings of fact for 2 is that due to conditions beyond the reasonable control of the petitioner, requiring compliance would result in either an arbitrary or unreasonable taking of property. I'm not sure how that would apply. Or B, the practical closing and elimination of a lawful business. And I think that Mr. Nunley had expressed that this is a sewer treatment plant, 24/7 operation, and for us to stop it would result in catastrophic overflow into the surrounding environment, of course. But
that's really not my. I'm looking at the statement here that this situation is beyond the reasonable control of the petitioner.
well, accordingly, the increasing influent H2S levels are beyond our control. They have started increasing in concentration due to a variety of different variables. I'm not technically understanding of what those are, but I'm being told by our consultants that H2S level coming into the plant has increased dramatically since the system was put in place. And as we had presented in the earlier graphic, anything over 10 ppm coming into the plant is really pushing toward the capacity of that ERISA system. And so we cannot go and pre-treat that or ask people to flush more water in the system to reduce that down. That's kind of like beyond our control.
And if I could also add, it's that addressing the higher concentrations of sulfide coming into the plant are beyond the ability of that system to address. So that ERISA system simply not sized for the level of sulfides that they're seeing, the plant is seeing now. And the level of sulfides coming into the plant really are outside of the city's control. They have to just be able to treat the off gas or the sulfides off whatever comes to the facility.
The facility was designed to treat 25 ppm.
Well, again, I would take you back to the introduction of the presentation. Board Member Herlock, when we had mentioned that it was a DBOF, we have plenty of evidence in multiple systems throughout that plant where the least expensive path was taken on all of the systems installed at that plant. And this is just but one of many. And we're seeing that if it was a design capacity issue, if it was just within just fractions of being able to meet that design capacity, that's what they purchased and that's what they installed. So we really had no control over that at the building of the plant.
And what we've observed is while 25 might have been the rated capacity or the written capacity of that system, as you see in slide number 9 from our presentation, that once you hit over about 10 parts per million, this system is not able to meet the 1.2 limit.
I would note that we're quite confident that the new biofilter system will handle any type of concentrations we've been experiencing at that plant. The design parameters that Mr. Martin had presented are actually it's the basis of design as a minimum criteria.
Okay. You're measuring, are you estimating or measuring the input and output levels of H2S?
We're measuring the output by a sensor. And if I could go back and just make one comment on the previous discussion, even in 2012, on the first source test that was ever conducted, there was one run where H2S was 13.5 coming into the plant, and it exceeded 1.2 on the effluent. So that the system, even as brand new, could not handle anything above about 10.
I see that in the item number 2 on this page. So are you measuring the input levels? You responded that you're measuring the output levels with an instrument.
Well, the only time we can measure influent is if we put a portable meter in to measure it, and use that data, which that system is I'm not sure of the accuracy above about maybe 20 or so, but there is no permanent system installed to measure influent. The most accurate data that we have is from the source test data, where it's actually sent out to a laboratory for analysis.
Okay, I don't have any further questions.
I do. I have 2. Will the new system have an input monitor? New design?
Yes, we'll be monitoring both inlet and outlet.
Good answer. And has there been studies or whatever on growth in Santa Paula? Have you, probably Clete can answer this better than anybody else. Have you included the growth in Santa Paula? Because there are a couple new out by by the railroad out. There's new growth in Santa Paula. Is there going to be? Is that part of what happened? And is there going to be more?
Well, to answer your question, Board Member Paulson, yes, we've considered future growth over the next 20 years coming into the plant. East Area 1 or Harvest
Right.
at Limoneira, as you're suggesting, we have about a couple hundred homes in there right now. Its ultimate capacity is 1,453 or so. And yes, that is incorporated into the system. It certainly will be incorporated into this biofilter odor control system as far as, yes?
No, I'm talking to somebody here,
Oh.
telling them to go away.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So yes, we are designing everything according to that 20-year projection.
Okay, thank you. What did you say?
Hey, your microphones aren't lighting up. And I'm taking your car and going away.
Okay,
It didn't light up. Is it on?
yes.
Chair Stubblefield, I believe we're at procedural step number 7 now.
Does the district have any questions for the petitioners?
This is Keith Macias. I'm representing the district. I do have a couple comments, and I just want to say that we have been, and I also want to talk about the H2S levels that we're all talking about here. But the district has been working with Santa Paula Wastewater Recycling Facility to come back into compliance for hydrogen sulfide emissions. since they failed the source test, they missed one, as Mr. Hurlock pointed out. They received an NOV for that. And then they did test on October 31st, 2019, which they failed. The ERISA system did fail that we're talking about now. They do have two systems, online. If you looked at the original chart, a HAWK system and a ERISA system. The HAWK system is still in compliance, but the ERISA system is not, and it cannot maintain current compliance. And we, with significant maintenance, repairs, recent modifications, better control to the ERISA system, they haven't been able to achieve 100% compliance. And, therefore they are here today to request an interim variance. As they're explaining, they will are planning on to replace both these systems, both the HAWK system and the ERISA system, with this new biological odor control system that we're talking about. It's a little bit more common system to wastewater control, and has in the chart they showed compared to some of the other wastewater facilities, the emissions that they can achieve are extremely low. So they expect to meet the 1.2 parts per million and or lower, and have a good compliance margin once they get that system in place. The issue, it's going to take about a year for them to do that. So they're here for the interim variance and of course followed up by a regular variance. And then one of the things that they're pointing out in issues, and they mentioned in their conclusions, is that the H2S levels have increased over time, particularly in the last several years. I don't know if you can go back to chart 9, Brendan, but
Give me
kind
just a second, I'll bring it up.
okay. I know there's some questions on that, and I know it was kind of hard to read because I had some questions on it too, but I just wanted to point out a couple of things. And one is, if you look at it's not chronological, as was mentioned earlier, which makes it a little hard to understand, but if you look at the red line that kind of separates, you see these lot lower H2S emissions on the left, and then a lot higher on the right. Well, if you look at that red line on the right, those higher emissions are 2015 and later, so 2015 to 2020. If you look on the left, those emissions are, earlier years, and you can see the lot lower levels, and you can also see how they increased. And in particular, the last several years, there has been a lot of increase in the H2S emissions, and as they're pointing out, it's overwhelming the ERISA system, and it's not able to. While it maintains pretty good, most of the time it's in compliance, it cannot maintain full compliance 100% of the time. And I think they mentioned it's in compliance on average about 85% of the time. So they have these excursions here and there where we'll go out of compliance. And as I mentioned earlier, their limit is 1.2 parts per million. It's one of the lowest limits out there for a wastewater facility in Ventura County. Other wastewater facilities have limits of 3, 4, 5, and up to 10 parts per million at the highest level. And as they mentioned, they're exceeding sometimes on average at up to about 6 parts per million. But I just wanted to add that summary and kind of help explain that. I know the graph was a little bit hard to understand, so just wanted to kind of go through that and explain that the levels of H2S have increased really over the last several years pretty significantly. And as they mentioned, the ERISA system is designed for about 25 parts per million, or was originally designed for about 25 parts per million, but can't operate at the 25 parts per million anymore because it's about 10 years old. There's deterioration and maintenance and things going on. And as they stated, when it gets over about 10 parts per million, they start seeing some excursions. That's all I wanted to say.
It's fine.
Thanks very much. Does the board have any questions?
It's fine.
Board members have any questions
Whatever.
for district staff?
Board Member Hurlock does not have any further questions.
I have one. On the reporting requirements, Kevin, Miss Mercedes. Can we ask for, as part of their biweekly reporting, the Friday biweekly reporting, ask for maintenance, operation and maintenance records, especially when there's an excursion the week before. Is that undue? Is that possible to ask?
I'm not entirely sure, but perhaps a member of the district might be able to answer that question.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's what I was
Yeah.
asking.
Yeah, he's,
Kevin.
This is Board Member Hurlock again. As a general rule, we can ask for pretty much anything.
Okay.
increments
There
of
you go.
progress. Yeah, this is Keith again. Yes, we can, we do
Keith,
have some
yeah, sorry.
increments of progress that can be part of the increments of progress. And they do also, just so you know, if a piece of equipment breaks down, there's breakdown requirements, breakdown rules as well. So when something happens to a piece of equipment, they also have to report that to us. And you're
Okay.
usually given a very short time to fix it and repair it. And if they can't repair it
Okay.
in that time frame, then they may have to ask for variance.
Okay. Thanks, Keith.
Thanks.
Do members of the
Well, I would
board
like,
have any other questions?
I would like that. Yeah, I would like, I don't know, specifically set in increments of progress or something of somehow report if there's a exceedance, like what maintenance. I'm a stickler for operations and maintenance. Sorry. I've seen too many things fail because operations and apparently, in my opinion, that's what happened before these organizations got involved. So I think Mike Nunley pointed that out, that that's pretty much what happened. The cheapest thing, and actually Cleat Sonier too, the cheapest thing that they could do, they did. And which may or may not be, I'm pontificating right now, sorry, which may or may not be good use of the taxpayers' money. But apparently it wasn't in this case. And I would like to see maintenance records, or, you know, like what you guys did to avoid, actually preferably preventive maintenance, but crisis maintenance also.
Yeah, Board Member Paulson, this is Norman Bijot, the CPO at the facility. We can supply you. We have preventive maintenance and corrective maintenance work orders that we do when we're doing a corrective as opposed to a preventive. I will make sure that we supply those biweekly to you. And if there's any other work that's done, we'll make sure. For instance, next week, we're going to be changing out the carbon in the Hawk unit. So I know that there's a notification that I need to, send out to the board and the Ventura County. I've already done that prior to this. I'm going to make sure I do that again at least 24 hours in advance of any maintenance work that we do.
Okay. Actually, I think you don't give it to me. You give it to the air pollution control
Yes.
district folks.
Thanks. And
So-
this is Keith again. And yeah, we can include that they include for any excursion events, all maintenance done to mitigate that event.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you.
Any further comments or questions from anyone?
Yeah, I do have one comment. Just wanted to add, now that we're talking about these excursion and maintenance events, one of the things that they did do in updating the software is the failure is at 1.2, at 1.2 parts per million is the limit. But they also implemented a 1.0 software check, in their software. So actually, before it fails, there's they get a warning at 1
Yeah.
part per million. So I just wanted to mention that. That's something that they did recently as well. Thanks.
The Chair Stubblefield, I don't know if, I'm not there, so I don't know if there's anybody in the auditorium, but normally would want to ask them if any members of the public have any comments.
No one from the public has presented themselves to speak today.
Okay, thank you.
If you'd like, you can close the public hearing and begin board deliberations.
If no one has any further points they want to make, then I'm going to adjourn this part of the meeting.
I agree with that.
I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the board and the Ventura County Air Pollution Division that's been helping support us there. And thank you very much for your support. And I can tell you that Veolia and the city will continue to do everything, including the reporting, to make sure that we maintain the best possible compliance measures as possible. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Any
I
further
don't know whether
business?
we need a motion for this, Mr. Chair, but I'd like to have us proceed to a vote on the request.
And I second, is that,
That's normally what we do, yeah.
okay.
Right.
First timer, a newbie.
May I please clarify, Board Member Herlock, your motion was to approve the interim variance, is that correct?
Yes, to grant the petition.
All right, so we have a motion by Board Member Herlock, a second by Board Member Paulson. And I'll now take the roll call vote. Board Member Herlock,
Aye.
Board Member Paulson,
Aye.
Board Member Stubblefield.
Aye.
All right, that motion passes. With that, Chair Stubblefield, the petition number 884 has been approved, and this item is complete. Next, we have item 6, public comment. As I've stated previously, no members of the public have presented themselves today to make public comment. Lastly, we have item number 7, board comment. If any of the board members wish to make general comments.
Do any members of the public wish to make a comment at this time? Board members?
No.
No comments. I might have come in a little bit late, but I'm seeing a new face on the district side, and that possibly could get an introduction.
If the district staff wants to just introduce themselves real quick, and we'll put them on camera.
This is Keith Macias. I manage the Compliance Division.
And
My name's Ed Swede. I'm Compliance Division Engineer.
hold on just a second. We got the camera on the wrong side. Can you just raise your hand one more time? Sorry, the camera guys were catching up with you. Now you're on camera.
Start over.
Yeah, sorry, the board members
Sure, no
couldn't
problem.
see you when you guys were.
So this is Keith Macias. I manage the Compliance Division at the district.
My name's Ed Swede. I'm Compliance Division Engineer.
And Ed deals directly with the source test, so he's very familiar with the source tests that occurred at this facility and the equipment. Michelle, do you want to introduce? Oh,
Oh, I'm sorry. Eric
Okay.
Jones, Assistant County Counsel assigned to advise the hearing board.
thanks, Eric.
You can come
I
up to
can't
the
hear.
podium if you'd like.
I think we've all met Board Member Herlock and Board Member Paulson, Board Member Stubblefield. I'm Michelle Wood, and I work in the Compliance Division, but also help out with the Hearing Board.
Last but not least, Lucky Tosopoulos, I'm the Air Pollution Control Officer. We met before, Mr. Horlock, but Ms. Paulson, it's my first time that I'm talking to you. Congratulations and welcome aboard.
Thank you.
She's just going to clean the podium off. So Chair Stubblefield, the time is 3:21 p.m. if you'd like to adjourn the meeting.
Any further comments? The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you.